Hey guys, this is your narrator, Historian Couch. Tonight, we start in a place where thunder sleeps, olive oil glows, and gods are less like distant deities and more like nosy neighbors who meddle in every part of your life. You're drifting toward Mount Olympus, not up exactly, but across time. Past the familiar crackle of a modern bedtime, into the hushed folds of ancient Greece. It's dark, but not silent. Laurel branches rustle. A slow breeze sighs down the mountainside. Somewhere, a goat sneezes. You're definitely not in Kansas anymore, or Athens, or anywhere with central heating. Mount Olympus at night doesn't look like a cathedral or a fortress. It looks like a rocky hill wreathed in stars, mostly unassuming, if not for the invisible, immortal egos lounging on its summit. You're here, imagining the gods not in their thunderous glory, but how they might have spent a quiet evening, because even immortals, one assumes, need to wind down. So sit back, relax, plug in your earphones, or just keep the phone near your pillow. Close your eyes. Let your body get heavy and your mind start to wander. We're not rushing anywhere tonight. You picture a soft glow from divine hearth fires. Zeus may be grumbling over some ambrosia-laced wine, while Hera reheats a grudge. Poseidon could be sulking in a fountain. Aphrodite reclines under perfumed silks, holding a mirror she doesn't need. Somewhere nearby, Hermes is rearranging someone's sandals just to be annoying. The thing is, these gods weren't just worshipped. They were understood, imperfect, unpredictable, and often deeply human. Greeks didn't pretend their deities were flawless. Quite the opposite. The pantheon was more like a celestial drama troupe, constantly feuding, scheming, seducing, and transforming. Historians still argue whether the gods reflected Greek society or dictated it, but one thing's certain: belief wasn't passive. These gods showed up in dreams, on battlefields, in illness, and even in the kitchen. Offerings weren't just rituals, they were negotiations. And like any deeply entrenched relationship, familiarity bred both reverence and casual complaint. One day, you prayed for Apollo's healing light. The next, you blamed him for sunburn and suspiciously timed plagues. Dionysus threw you the party of your life, then left you with a mysterious hangover and an empty purse. And Hades? Well, no one invited him to dinner, but everyone secretly hoped he wouldn't show up unannounced. Tonight, you aren't studying them like a museum exhibit. You're visiting them like a neighbor dropping by, one who's too sleepy to argue, too curious to leave. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is, especially if it's past midnight and you've already flipped your pillow twice. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step closer to the divine dining table, half expecting gold goblets and shimmering nectar, but instead, you see olives, bread, wine, cheese, very Greek, very humble. The gods may have lived above, but they dined like the mortals who honored them. Symbolically, of course, it wasn't about the ingredients, it was about the attention. Burnt bits of fat left on altars, first sips of wine poured to the ground. These weren't leftovers, they were lifelines, a kind of divine text message, thinking of you, And in return, the gods sometimes answered through omens, dreams, or really dramatic weather. That's the thing about Olympus. It wasn't just a peak, it was a presence, not even particularly high by modern standards, but lofty enough to hold a metaphor, and stable enough to hold stories that lasted longer than most empires. Some tales say Zeus chose Olympus as his throne after defeating the Titans. Others suggest it was always sacred. Either way, it's where thunder got its echo, and gossip got divine amplification. The stars above shimmer a bit brighter now. Maybe that's Artemis prowling, maybe not, but you can feel it. That sense that the world and the gods are always just a little awake, watching, whispering, waiting for you to notice. And now you have. You're still standing at the edge of Olympus, but now your focus shifts. Because while Zeus tends to get all the dramatic lightning, and let's face it, the press, he's not the only one up here running the show. Not by a long shot. You hear footsteps, soft, deliberate, sandal. And there she is, Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, women, and just a touch of barely contained rage. Her robes shimmer in shades of saffron and deep blue, her hair braided with golden threads. She doesn't speak at first. She doesn't need to. You feel her presence like a courtroom hush. She's not here to be liked. She's here to be respected. And possibly feared, depending on your personal relationship with loyalty. You probably wouldn't survive a dinner with her, honestly. Hera is complicated. She's often remembered as jealous and vengeful, mostly because of Zeus and his endless extracurricular activities. But if you look closer, there's something sharper underneath that stereotype. She represents the ancient ideal of structure, of legitimacy, not just in marriage, but in law, ritual, and legacy. Historians still argue whether Hera's reputation as a scorned wife was propaganda from patriarchal scribes, or whether she really did wield thunderous glares like divine daggers. But there's no doubt she was powerful. Her temples were among the oldest and grandest in the ancient world. People didn't just whisper her name in fear. They built cities around it. You notice she carries a scepter, not unlike Zeus's, but hers is adorned with pomegranates and lilies, symbols of both fertility and death, dualities. She's not a goddess of soft romance, but of the contracts beneath it, the promises, the stakes. Now imagine ancient Greek women praying to her on their wedding nights, not for passion, for safety, for recognition, for strength. Hera was the one who watched the thresholds. She stood at the border between maidenhood and motherhood, between being someone's daughter and someone's wife. You glance at her face. It's calm, too calm. Like a sea just before the storm decides whether to happen. And still there's grace, there's pride. She's not chasing love, she's guarding its boundaries. She's the architect of expectation, and frankly, that's exhausting. No wonder she's tense. A soft rustle nearby pulls your attention, and the spell breaks. Now another figure enters the frame. More relaxed, more mischievous, and very, very fast. Hermes. Yes, that Hermes. The wing-sandaled delivery boy of the gods. Patron of travelers, merchants, thieves, and anyone who's ever had to explain themselves quickly. You barely have time to register him before he's behind you, then beside you, then halfway up a tree with a grin that says, "Did you miss something?" He's in russet and teal, with a short cloak and a traveler's cap, wide-brimmed and tilted, like he's always half in character. And he probably is. Hermes doesn't walk. He glides. And when he talks, it's never just to you. It's to the air, the stars, the gossiping birds overhead. He's got places to be, messages to deliver, souls to guide, borderlines to dance on. You can't help but smile. He's the god of motion, of negotiation, of fast exits and smoother entries. Need something smuggled? Hermes. Want to cross safely between realms? Hermes. Trying to find the words for an apology you haven't quite worked out? You guessed it. Ancient traders carved his name into stones along the road. Athletes whispered prayers before races. Even pickpockets asked for his blessing. Quick hands, quicker feet. Historians still argue whether Hermes began as a local fertility deity or a full-blown trickster imported from older Indo-European myths. But either way, he stuck. Because every civilization needs a boundary breaker. Someone who greases the gears, tells the jokes, steals the cattle, and somehow still gets invited to dinner. He hops down and tosses you a walnut, still in its shell. It's a game, apparently. You try to crack it. Fail. He laughs. And then he's gone again. Hera's eyes roll slightly. You're beginning to see the dynamic now. Olympus isn't orderly. It's barely functional. It's like one of those large group texts that should have stayed an email. Still, it works. Sort of. You feel a low rumble. Far off, but definite. The wind shifts. Lightning flickers. Zeus is waking up. Better not be in his seat. Zeus has that energy, the kind that makes you straighten your back without knowing why. You hear the thunder before you see him. But it's not angry thunder. More like authoritative background noise. A gentle reminder that somewhere above all this myth and marble, there's still someone holding the master switch. And then, there he is, cloaked in indigo, with streaks of white and gold woven into the hem. His beard looks like it has its own gravitational pull, and his gaze flickers like stormlight behind heavy clouds. He's tall but not towering, broad but not bulky. It's the presence that does it. He doesn't command attention. He assumes it's already been given. Zeus, king of the gods, the one with the lightning bolt, the weather guy, the "it's complicated" in everyone else's divine biography. You probably wouldn't survive being on his bad side, or his good side, for that matter. Affection from Zeus came with consequences, and usually a thunderclap or a questionable swan incident. He sits, and the entire hilltop shifts around him like furniture, rearranging itself for royalty. His throne is carved from storm clouds and stories you're pretty sure people aren't supposed to tell. He raises one eyebrow, just slightly, and the wind dies down. A single eagle circles overhead. Symbolic? Absolutely. Intimidating? Also yes. Zeus rules over the sky, law, oaths, hospitality, and power itself. But he also rules over narrative dominance. Every myth you think you know, he's probably in it, or started it, or ended it, because someone was getting too interesting. Historians still argue whether the Zeus we picture today, white-bearded, lightning-clad, was always the image ancient Greeks had in mind. Early depictions show him younger, more warlike, maybe a holdover from storm gods older than Olympus itself. But what never changed? His authority, his need to be in the center of the frame. He gestures, and Hera shifts slightly. Not submission, more like protocol. Hermes reappears. How did he do that? And offers something that looks suspiciously like a gossip scroll. Zeus doesn't read it, just grunts. You watch him closely, trying to figure out the line between wisdom and ego. It's blurry. He loves order, but his personal life is chaos. He demands justice, but makes plenty of exceptions for himself. And yet, he's oddly relatable. Not in a you'd grab lunch with him way, but in the way power often feels. Messy, reactive, charismatic, exhausting. A small clap behind you breaks the silence. It's a girl, young, bright-eyed, holding a scroll and a spear. Athena. She's not smiling, but she isn't cold either. Just focused, like she's been reading your thoughts this whole time, and has a few corrections to make. Her armor gleams, not flashy, more ceremonial, and her helmet rests in the crook of her arm like a casual afterthought. She wears a peplos in smoky gray with a small owl embroidered at the hem. Her eyes are sharp, not cruel, just precise. You feel smarter just looking at her. Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, crafts, and civic life. Born fully armed, from Zeus's forehead. No mother, no childhood, just bang. Goddess. It's a weird origin story, but that's Olympus for you. She walks past Zeus and Hera without bowing, just a nod. Respectful, not deferential. She's what the Greeks thought a perfect mind looked like. Disciplined, calculating, creative. Patron of Athens, namesake of cities, and favorite of philosophers. People prayed to her not just for victory in war, but for clarity in argument, for clean pottery lines, for insight. Historians still argue whether Athena was always intended as a war goddess, or if that came later. Some early forms suggest she was more of a household deity, guardian of hearth and loom, before she got promoted to battlefield strategist. Either way, she kept her cool. She passes you something, a thread, unspooling slowly from her hand to yours. No explanation, just a tool, a challenge, a reminder. Use your mind, she seems to say, or lose it. Behind her, a shimmer in the air, another presence. No thunder, no rustle, just blooming. Springtime, caught in human form. Persephone. She's not here long, just a moment. It's enough. Persephone doesn't announce herself. She arrives like a scent on the wind. Pomegranate and new grass. Something bright and something buried. You blink and there she is. Her gown flows in two tones. Pale saffron for spring. Deep wine red for the underworld. A crown of woven wheat and poppy blossoms sits lightly in her curls. Her eyes carry the season's turn, and her smile is brief but real. She doesn't speak, she just tilts her head, as if asking whether you understand how strange her life really is. You probably wouldn't survive 1 week in her world. Too much shifting. Too many bargains with consequences. Persephone is duality incarnate. Goddess of renewal and queen of the dead. Beloved daughter and reluctant bride. Her myth hinges on choice, or the illusion of it. She was gathering flowers when Hades opened the earth beneath her and took her to his realm. According to some versions, she was a victim. In others, she negotiated her stay. It depends who's telling the story. Historians still argue whether the myth of Persephone began as a seasonal allegory, explaining why plants die and return, or as a symbolic initiation into the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth. Either way, she became a powerful figure, not a damsel, not a queen in waiting, but a ruler in her own right. She kneels beside a patch of earth and touches the soil. A green shoot sprouts, instantly, curling toward her fingers. Then she rises and walks on, and the air cools slightly. The earth remembers where she's been. As she passes, Hermes salutes her, playfully but with respect. They know each other well. He's the only god allowed to pass freely between the worlds above and below. They've shared more midnights than most siblings ever will. You're still watching her when another presence approaches. This one louder, Ares. He doesn't stomp, he strides. And the ground seems to toughen beneath his sandals, just to keep up. He's dressed in bronze, not polished, but battle-worn, dented and proud. His cloak is dark crimson. His eyes are quick, not with thought, but with heat. He doesn't calculate, he charges. Ares, god of war. Not strategy, not noble defense, but pure, pulsing combat. He's the part of war that breaks things, not the part that plans. You can see why the Greeks had mixed feelings about him. You probably wouldn't survive one argument with him. Not because he's clever, because he'd flip the table before the debate began. He cracks his knuckles as he walks past, nodding at Athena with a smirk. They don't get along. She's war of the mind. He's war of the gut. And yet, they're both needed. Civilizations have space for generals and gladiators. Historians still argue whether Ares was ever truly loved by the Greeks. He had more temples in the Roman era, when he was merged with Mars. But in Athens, not so much. He represented something necessary, but dangerous. You respected him, but from a distance. He unslings a spear from his shoulder and twirls it absently, not threatening, just bored. Ares, when not in battle, is like a lion in a library. Wrong setting. Wrong mood. Too much energy, not enough targets. He vanishes into the trees, and for a moment, all is still again, until you hear laughter. Gentle at first, then bubbling, then almost musical. You turn, and she's already mid-spin. Aphrodite. You expected glamour, didn't you? Maybe a little glitter? But no. Aphrodite is earthy, real, magnetic in a way that pulls your thoughts out of your head and into your pulse. Her gown clings like sea foam, and her skin seems sunlit even in shade. Her hair, too perfect to be believable, moves as if kissed by wind that answers only to her. You definitely wouldn't survive one compliment from her. You'd trip over your own breath. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, desire, and all the chaos those things cause. Born from sea foam, some say. Others claim she's older than the Titans. Like love itself, her origin story refuses to settle down. She walks barefoot, pausing now and then to admire flowers or peer curiously at a passing butterfly. But don't be fooled. Beneath the soft edges, is a power that empires have toppled for. Love in her realm is not always gentle. It's obsession, jealousy, longing, triumph, heartbreak, and occasionally really bad poetry. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite's cult began as a fertility goddess worshipped in Cyprus and the Near East, or whether she sprang directly from Greek imaginations. But the influence is clear. Her domain isn't just romantic, it's elemental. She tosses you a rose. It blooms mid-air. Of course it does. And as she walks on, you find yourself humming some tune you don't know, but somehow remember. She doesn't look back, because she knows you're already watching. He doesn't walk, he slinks. Moves like a rumor, all shadow and suggestion. Hades arrives quietly, and the world doesn't shudder. It stills. There's nothing theatrical about him. No flaming crown, no skeletal steed. Just a dark kite, simple and well cut, and eyes that have seen every ending. They don't blink much. They don't need to. He waits. That's his power. You probably wouldn't survive one glance from him. Not because he's cruel, but because he'd see too much. Not just your sins, your fears, your patterns, your reasons, and that's more terrifying than any three-headed guard dog. Hades, ruler of the underworld, is often misunderstood. Not evil, just inevitable. The Greeks didn't hate him. They respected him. Feared him, yes, but in the way you fear the ocean at night. It's vast, it's necessary, and it's absolutely not where you want to go uninvited. He carries no scythe. That's a later invention. He carries keys, a ring of them, tied at his hip. Keys to all gates that don't open twice. You nod, he nods. No words, just an understanding. Sleep, death, forgetting. They're siblings in his house. Historians still argue whether Hades had a fully formed cult, or was simply absorbed into chthonic rituals honoring the dead more broadly. Few temples were built for him, but offerings were made often and discreetly. You didn't light incense for Hades. You buried it, quietly, alone. He steps aside to let another figure through. This one doesn't walk either. She floats. Nyx, goddess of night, one of the oldest. Her robe trails stars behind her, not embroidered, but born from her own movements. Her face is ageless, neither youthful nor elderly, just inevitable. You don't remember her entering, but she's here now. She's always been here, actually. You just hadn't noticed. Her presence silences even the gods. Not out of fear, exactly, but because she is what they rest within. Even Zeus, with all his thunder, respected Nyx. There's a fragment of myth where he hesitates to cross her. That's saying something. You wouldn't survive one secret from her lips, not because it would harm you, but because your mind would unravel trying to understand it. Nyx doesn't speak. She just raises one pale hand and covers the moon with her palm. And you realize it's quieter now, not darker somehow, just more inward, as though the world has turned its gaze away from itself. A wind blows, carrying the faintest scent of crushed lavender and something older, dust from the edge of memory. Sleep pulls gently at your shoulders, but the story isn't over. Not yet. Nyx drifts on, and from her folds emerges a smaller figure. Hypnos, Sleep himself. He looks exactly as you expect, and not at all. Soft curls, a serene face, but his eyes are open, barely, always hovering at the edge of a blink. He carries a horn in one hand, tipped downward. In another, a bunch of poppies. His touch isn't cold, it's cool, like stone that's never known the sun. You probably wouldn't survive a handshake. You'd fall asleep mid-greeting. Hypnos doesn't need to work hard tonight. He glances at you, considers, then decides you're still too alert. That's fine. He's not in a rush. He's never in a rush. Historians still argue whether Hypnos was actively worshipped or simply invoked, called upon like a gentle solution, a balm. Temples to him were rare, but dreams were his messengers. That counted for something. He walks on, barefoot, unbothered by the gods around him. Even Ares makes room. No one wants to dual sleep. The moment shifts again. Suddenly, there's music. Not a melody, a rhythm, a pulse, like footsteps, but bigger, louder, drumming through your ribs. You turn, and there she is, Gaia. Not goddess, titaness, Earth herself, mother of all. Not in the poetic sense, in the geological one. She rises like a mountain made of grace. Her robe is moss and bark, stone-laced silk. Her hair spills in vines, and her hands seem capable of planting and crushing in the same motion. You wouldn't survive a hug. You'd dissolve into compost and somehow be okay with it. She smiles, broad and slow. It isn't a personal smile. It's the kind the planet gives to every creature equally. Affection without memory. She has too many children to keep names straight. Historians still argue whether Gaia was truly believed to be conscious or symbolic, a representation of life's interconnectedness. Either way, she endures. She's the one you walk on, the one you return to. She speaks, but it's not in words. It's in the shifting of grass, the creak of a tree branch, the sigh of rock cooling at twilight. And then she too is gone, back into herself, and the gods continue to pass, like dreams you forgot you were dreaming. You rub your eyes, just for a moment, the kind of blink that feels longer than it should. And when you look again, the sky seems different, not just in color, but in arrangement. Like someone's taken the stars and shuffled them around, pulling new constellations from a very old deck. You're not in the company of the Titans anymore. The next figures are lighter, brighter. The Olympians. They don't enter with grandeur. They arrive the way thoughts do, suddenly, then all at once. A woman in a flowing saffron robe steps forward, her eyes sharp enough to slice marble. She moves like a strategist and stands like a queen, though she wears no crown. Her owl lands nearby, silent, tilting its head at you. Athena, goddess of wisdom, war, and crafts. A confusing portfolio if you think about it too hard, but that's half the point. She is logic and passion, structure and spontaneity. If someone built a library and a catapult in the same afternoon, she probably whispered the idea. You wouldn't survive one lesson from her, not because she's cruel, but because she wouldn't slow down. She'd assume you knew the basics of geometry, rhetoric, and statecraft, and you'd nod along until your brain gave up and politely excused itself. She does not smile, but her presence is not cold. It's calibrated. Historians still argue whether Athena was originally a war deity or a protector of cities who later took on military associations. What's clear is that Athens, named for her, considered her their spiritual architect. Temples to Athena aren't just places of worship. They're monuments to mental effort. Her owl blinks again. Once, twice, then flies upward, a brief ink dot against the star-washed sky. From the direction of the owl's flight comes someone else. Bright robes, tousled curls, a lyre slung carelessly over one shoulder. You don't need a name tag. Apollo, sun god, music god, healing god, prophecy god. Honestly, he's a lot. The golden boy of Olympus, often literally. He beams at you, not out of warmth, but because he shines. Light leaks from his movements. His fingers twitch like he's always mid-song, and for a moment, the air around you vibrates faintly, as if the strings of the cosmos have been plucked. You wouldn't survive one serenade, not because it would hurt, but because it would explain too much. Your regrets, your hopes, your awkward 8th grade poetry, all rendered beautifully, and you'd just sit there crying into your tunic. Historians still argue whether Apollo was imported into Greek myth or developed organically within it. His domains are too many, his stories too broad, and his contradictions too intriguing to place neatly in any one origin story. He's the god of clarity, and yet, so much about him remains opaque. He gestures upward with his lyre, and for a moment, the stars seem to flicker in harmony. But Apollo's light casts shadows. And where there are shadows, Artemis. She doesn't enter, she arrives. Barefoot, silent, hair pulled back with a strip of linen, bow slung over her shoulder, and a quiver that never empties. She is not here for you. She is not here for anyone. She is here because this is also her night. Goddess of the hunt, wild animals, and the moon. Also protector of young girls and childbirth, which you might think is an odd pairing. But that's Artemis, untamable and maternal, feral and focused. You wouldn't survive one night in her woods. Not because you'd get lost, but because you'd be found, and judged, and left precisely where you fell. She glances at Apollo. They nod, not quite warmly, but knowingly. Twins who grew in opposite directions. Historians still argue whether Artemis's virginity was a symbolic choice or a reflection of earlier, pre-Hellenic fertility goddess traditions that emphasized independence over romance. She's never quite belonged to the narratives others placed her in, and she prefers it that way. You realize your own breathing has softened, slowed. Her presence does that, like cool moonlight on a feverish forehead. The siblings recede, but someone else has already stepped into their space. He's shorter, rounder, louder, and absolutely delighted to be here. Dionysus. If Apollo is clarity, Dionysus is chaos. God of wine, theater, frenzy, masks, and the weird places between sleep and dream. He grins at you, like you've just agreed to a terrible idea, and he can't wait to see how it goes. You wouldn't survive one party with him, not because it would destroy you, but because it would change you, and you wouldn't be able to explain how, or why your sandals are missing. His hair is wild, his tunic too loose, and he carries a thyrsus, a pine cone-topped staff that somehow doesn't look ridiculous in his hands. He spins once, and the ground beneath him shifts slightly, like even reality isn't quite sure where it stands with Dionysus. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was a late addition to the Olympians or an older chthonic figure absorbed into newer myths. His duality, life and death, ecstasy and madness, suggests layers deeper than his party god stereotype implies. He winks, raises a goblet that appeared from nowhere, and toasts you. The wine smells like memory and dreams and very poor decisions. You nod back, cautiously. He laughs and fades, and the night begins to hum again. A little warmer, a little weirder, a little more divine. The humming quiets, like a harp string released, and a new figure forms on the edge of your vision. He's leaning against an olive tree, arms crossed, expression unreadable. His hair is wild but not unkempt, and he has the kind of face you'd trust to fix a broken roof or lead a rebellion. Maybe both. This is Hephaestus. You probably didn't expect the god of fire and metalwork to show up so quietly. But Hephaestus doesn't need fanfare. His forge makes the noise for him. His hands are thick-fingered, strong and dusted in soot. His tunic is plain, russet brown, like burnt clay. One leg drags just slightly as he walks, but he doesn't hide it. If anything, it punctuates his presence. Each step ringing. Hephaestus was thrown from Olympus, remember? Cast out by his mother, Hera, for being imperfect. He survived the fall, landed in the sea, grew up under the care of sea nymphs, built his own throne, then made weapons for gods and palaces from molten gold. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus's myths reflect older traditions of crippled divine smiths, possibly connected to fire gods in Asia Minor. What's certain is that he represents both labor and artistry, two things often separated in modern minds. He doesn't speak, but the quiet weight of him lingers. A god who doesn't seek praise, only precision, and then a voice, so soft it barely ripples the air. Come away from the fire. You turn, and she's there, Aphrodite, and suddenly nothing else exists. She doesn't glow, she doesn't sparkle, but the space around her shifts like silk. Her robes, saffron and rose, move like they remember every hand that ever touched them. Her gaze doesn't pierce, it pulls. You wouldn't survive one compliment from her. Not because it would be false, but because it would be true in a way you hadn't admitted to yourself. She is the goddess of love, beauty, desire, but also persuasion, laughter, and political maneuvering. Do not mistake softness for simplicity. Historians still argue whether she originated as a fertility goddess imported from the East or developed within Greek religion as a response to social norms. Her oldest stories link her with the sea, with foam, with primal longing. And yet, she married Hephaestus. Well, married. The stories there are complicated. Depending on the version, she was loyal, disloyal, both, or neither. But that's Aphrodite. She doesn't belong to one person. She belongs to the moment when someone sees someone else and forgets how to breathe. She smiles at you now, not flirtatiously, not knowingly, just kindly, as if to say, I see you. Then she's gone, and in her place, war. Or rather, the god of it. Ares arrives the way thunder does, inevitable, loud, and a little inconvenient. He's tall, bronze-armored, spear casually slung over one shoulder like it's a garden rake. His face is handsome, in a way that suggests he knows it and resents the responsibility. You wouldn't survive a single duel with him. Not because he's the best fighter, he's not, but because he wouldn't stop. Even if he won, even if he lost. Ares isn't about strategy. That's Athena's domain. He's about fury, momentum, and reckless courage. The kind of god who shows up when the first punch is thrown and sticks around until everyone forgets what they were fighting about. Historians still argue whether the Greeks actually respected Ares. In many myths, even the gods seem embarrassed by him. But war needs its patron, and Ares filled that space, messy, brutal, and human. He doesn't greet you, he just swings his spear once, as if testing the air, then vanishes into the dark. And from that same darkness, something else. Not a warrior, not a lover, a queen. Hera, regal, severe, dignified. She stands as if the world has already disappointed her 3 times today, and it's only dawn. Her robes are indigo, her eyes are steel, and her presence make for spine straighten without thinking. You wouldn't survive one critique from her, not because she's cruel, but because she's right and you know it. She is the goddess of marriage, of family, of rightful order, not domesticity, authority. She doesn't tend the hearth, she enforces the household. And yes, she's famous for being vengeful, for pursuing Zeus's many infidelities with more fire than he ever received himself. But think of that more as quality control. She enforces the vows others so easily discard. Historians still argue whether Hera's vengefulness is a later narrative device to explain shifting gender norms in myth. But some believe she's older than Zeus himself, a matriarchal deity reshaped to fit a patriarchal mold. She doesn't nod to you, she expects your respect, and you give it. The wind picks up again, not harsh, not soft, just firm. And with it, another presence, or 2, because we're not done yet. You brace yourself, because when the wind picks up in ancient Greece, it often means more than weather. From opposite directions, 2 figures arrive nearly in sync. Hermes first. You hear him before you see him. A faint jingle of bronze sandals, a rustle of winged cap feathers, and the quiet chuckle of someone who's just outwitted 3 people without even trying. He moves like a breeze that chose to take shape. His cloak is teal, pinned at the shoulder with a spiral brooch, and the caduceus, his staff, taps lightly with each step. Twin snakes curl around it like they're whispering secrets. You wouldn't survive a conversation with Hermes. Not because he'd trick you, but because you wouldn't realize it until hours later, standing in the agora, wondering why you now own a goat and owe someone 3 jars of olive oil. He's the god of messengers, boundaries, trade, language, and thieves, a protector of travelers, a master of transitions. Historians still argue whether Hermes originated as a pastoral god among early shepherd tribes or as a linguistic deity of crossroads and contracts. Either way, he's always in motion, never fully here, never entirely there. He winks as he passes, and then, more slowly, more heavily, comes Demeter. No one ever describes her as light. She's presence, she's harvest, she's the thick smell of grain fields and the ache in your back after a long day of planting. Her robes are golden ochre, woven from imaginary wheat. Her hair is braided with stalks. She carries no weapon, no symbol, just a worn wooden sickle and the silence of someone who understands grief. You wouldn't survive a winter without her, literally. She's the goddess of agriculture, fertility, and the sacred bond between mother and child. She doesn't speak, but her gaze makes your stomach tighten, not with fear, with empathy, like she sees something in you, even you've forgotten to tend. Her story is marked by loss. Her daughter Persephone, stolen by Hades. Her mourning turned the world cold. Her anger starved it. Only compromise brought the seasons back. Historians still argue whether the Persephone myth was built to explain agriculture cycles, or if it encoded deeper social rituals, initiation rites, or the mysteries of Eleusis. But one thing is clear: Demeter isn't fragile. She endures. She lingers only a moment, then vanishes like mist off a barley field at dawn. Now there's a lull. You pause, expecting another god to step from the shadows. Instead, the shadows themselves begin to move. A rustling like bat wings. A hush like temples being swept after closing. And then Artemis. She does not approach. She appears, bow slung across her shoulder, quiver at her back, a crescent moon caught in her hair. Her tunic is short, forest green, perfect for movement. Her sandals are laced tight. Her eyes flash with wild clarity, the look of someone who's never doubted he. You wouldn't survive in her woods, not because she'd hurt you, but because she wouldn't help you either. She's the goddess of the hunt, of wilderness, of maidenhood. She protects what doesn't ask for permission. She nods to you once. That's more than most ever get. Historians still argue whether Artemis was originally a lunar goddess or primarily a protector of animals and young girls. Maybe both, maybe neither. But her presence makes one thing obvious. She belongs only to herself. As you watch her melt back into the night, a new scent rides the wind. Salt. Not sweat. Not tears. Sea. And with it, an unmistakable figure. Poseidon. He does not glide. He crashes. Not in clumsiness, but in certainty. Like a tide that doesn't care who's standing in its way. He's broad-chested, hair tangled like seaweed, beard dripping with imagined ocean spray. His robes are teal and indigo, embroidered with fish scales. In one hand, his trident, in the other, a shell, half cracked. You wouldn't survive his mood swings. Sailors prayed to him before every voyage and cursed him after every storm. He's not just god of the sea. He rules horses, earthquakes, and the tension beneath every coastline. He's as generous as he is destructive. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's origins lie in inland water deities or were imported through coastal trade myths. What's consistent is his unpredictability. Some days protector, some days punisher. He sees you, tilts his head, then moves on, already bored. The space around you thickens. It feels like you've entered the breath before thunder. And just as quickly, it lifts. No one else comes, for now. You look around at where you've landed. A half-lit clearing. Olive trees above, dusty earth below. The memory of gods pressed gently into the air, like fingerprints on soft wax. You sit, not from exhaustion, but reverence. It's been a long walk, hasn't it? And you've only just begun to meet them all. A hush falls again, the kind that doesn't ask for silence. It simply assumes it. You sit in the dim grove, your hands brushing dry grass, when another shadow unfolds beside you. This one carries the weight of thought. It's Athena. You recognize her not because she announces herself, but because the air sharpens. Her eyes gleam like polished obsidian under moonlight, and her cloak, rich in indigo with bronze-threaded edges, moves like a battle hymn you haven't learned the words to yet. She doesn't draw a weapon, doesn't need to. Her very presence, historians still argue whether Athena descended from older Libyan or Near Eastern warrior goddesses, or whether she was shaped entirely by the Greek polis, especially Athens, which bore her name like a badge. Either way, she became a blueprint, intellect made divine. She kneels, barely, and with one finger traces something in the dirt beside you. A circle, then a spiral, then a small, careful olive branch. A lesson? A warning? Or just a doodle from a goddess too brilliant to sleep? She stands again, says nothing, and leaves. Then a scent catches you off guard. Myrrh and rose oil and something honeyed. A presence so vivid you almost stand. Aphrodite. You don't see her at first. You feel her, like warmth radiating from a fire just out of reach. She enters the clearing with a grace that feels accidental, like a breeze that happened to swirl your direction. Her gown, a shade of saffron no dye maker could replicate, clings and flows in equal measure. Her hair gleams as if sunlight were hiding there. You wouldn't survive her gaze, not because it would wound, but because it would make you question every unspoken thing you've ever longed for. She's the goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and desire. But not just physical. Longing, yearning, the ache behind every love poem scratched onto pottery shards. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite was adopted from Eastern fertility goddesses like Astarte, or whether she grew organically from Greek seafaring communities, longing for the shimmer of connection. Some say she rose from sea foam. Others say she was born of chaos. Perhaps both are true. She hums softly as she walks. You try not to listen too closely. You wonder, do gods fall in love with mortals, or only with the idea of them? She glances back at you, not a smirk, not even a smile, just acknowledgement. The way you're left in a space rich with the memory of scent and starlight. The quiet that follows is not empty, it's anticipatory, which is why the next figure almost startles you. He doesn't arrive from above or beyond. He just appears, leaning casually against a tree, fiddling with something invisible in his hands. Dionysus. You know him before he speaks, because everything about him is slightly off. Not in a dangerous way, in a dreamlike way. His tunic is dark plum, stitched with ivy thread, and his hair falls in soft, wild curls around his face. He smells like fermented grapes and midnight. You wouldn't survive a party with him, or you'd survive too well and wonder where the last 3 nights went. The god of wine, theater, madness, and ecstatic revelation. The divine rule breaker. The one who asks not whether you're ready, but whether you've been pretending too long. He pops a fig into his mouth and offers another toward you. You decline. He shrugs. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was always Greek or an imported deity absorbed into Hellenic worship. Either way, he was beloved by those left out of polite society. Women, outcasts, revelers. His rituals were loud, ecstatic, transgressive, and deeply, deeply human. He smiles lazily, then sings, just one line of some forgotten tune, and wanders off, trailing the scent of revelry behind him. You exhale, because breathing around gods is harder than it looks. And yet, one more steps into the clearing. She comes not with fanfare, but with finality. Hestia. You almost miss her. Her presence is that quiet. She wears no elaborate robes, no symbols. Her gown is soft gray, like ash after a fire has burned low. In her hand, a clay lamp, steady, warm. She's the goddess of the hearth, of home, of stillness, the one who remains when all others leave. You wouldn't survive her absence, not because you'd be harmed, but because you wouldn't notice what you lost until your fire went cold. Historians still argue whether Hestia's influence was greater in private homes or public rituals, but her importance is clear. Every offering began and ended with her. Every prayer, every meal, every quiet moment alone. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. She simply places her lamp on a flat stone, lets it burn, and walks away. The light remains, a reminder that even among gods who rule oceans, skies, and passions, someone must keep the fire going. You sit again. It's been a parade of the divine, and yet you don't feel overwhelmed. You feel held, because even gods, strange and contradictory as they are, reflect the parts of yourself you only acknowledge in the quiet. And tonight, that quiet has grown wide enough to hold them all. You remain seated, the glow of Hestia's lamp still flickering nearby, like the last heartbeat of a dream. But then the sky shifts, subtle at first. A darker blue bleeds into the horizon, signaling something is stirring beyond the realm of stillness. You sense it before you see him. A breeze brushes your arm, stronger, cooler, charged. Then he descends, literally, landing with the kind of practiced ease that only comes from centuries of dramatic entrances. His golden chariot fades behind him like mist. His armor gleams, not because it's polished, but because it resents not being noticed. Ares, you blink. The god of war doesn't wait for approval. He exists like a clenched fist in a temple, out of place, but impossible to ignore. His red tunic flares at the edges, as if the wind is afraid to touch him directly. His eyes burn, not with rage, but with restlessness, like someone who's already thinking about the next fight before the current one ends. You wouldn't survive a sparring match. Or you would, but only because he let you. Ares doesn't speak. He paces. The kind of pacing that sharpens swords and grinds teeth. He is tension incarnate. And yet, there's something strangely tragic about him. Historians still argue whether Ares was truly honored or merely tolerated in ancient Greece. Unlike Athena, who represented tactical warfare, Ares was the chaos of the battlefield, the bloodlust, the screams. Not strategic, raw. Most city-states preferred Athena's version. Ares, in many tales, loses, or embarrasses himself, or causes more trouble than he's worth. And yet, the Spartans revered him. He stops pacing and looks at you, not angrily, almost curiously, like he's wondering if you've ever really felt fury. White-hot, bone-deep, cleansing fury. Then he nods once. You don't nod back. You just breathe. He disappears not into the sky, but into the trees, like a shadow returning to itself. The grove is quiet again, but not for long. A chill settles on your shoulders next, not from fear, but from inevitability. You hear the rustle of feathers, heavy, measured. Then a figure appears in a midnight cloak that trails like ink across the grass. Hades. No flames, no pitchforks, just presence. He's tall, but not imposing. pale, but not ghostly. His expression is unreadable, not cruel, just final. You wouldn't survive eye contact. Or maybe you would, but your reflection might not. In his hand, a sprig of asphodel, the flower of the underworld. Its petals look fragile, like they're already mourning themselves. He doesn't speak either. He just stands, watches, waits. Hades is not the villain modern stories have made him. The ancient Greeks didn't see him as evil. He ruled the dead, yes, but with order, with dignity. The underworld wasn't hell. It was simply the other place. The place after. Historians still argue whether Hades was worshipped at all, or merely respected from a cautious distance. Temples to him were rare, offerings discreet. Yet he was necessary, essential. The god you hoped to avoid, but would one day meet anyway. He kneels, places the asphodel on a stone beside Hestia's lamp, and rises without a sound. Then he's gone, leaving only the faint scent of cold earth and something like rain. You exhale, slower this time. And from the hush, laughter bubbles up. Not loud, not cruel, just amused. And there he is, Hermes, half grinning like he's heard this whole story from the rafters. His winged sandals barely touch the ground. His cloak is teal, fastened with a bronze pin shaped like a tortoise. His hat, a petasos, is tilted at an angle that says, "I know more than I let on." You wouldn't survive a game of riddles with him. Or you'd win, and he'd pretend to lose. Hermes is the messenger, the trickster, the god of boundaries. He moves between worlds, between gods and men, between the living and the dead. Historians still argue whether Hermes began as a pastoral god or a protector of travelers. Either way, he became a bridge, literal and symbolic. He sits beside you like it's the most natural thing in the world. "Long night?" he asks, voice low, musical. You nod. He offers you a dried fig from some hidden pocket. You accept. Together, you chew in silence. He doesn't need to say much. His presence hums with meaning, movement, transition, change. He taps the dirt beside you with his foot, leaving no mark. "Sleep comes," he says finally, "when the stories stop pretending to end." You tilt your head, trying to understand. He laughs softly. "Exactly." Then he stands, winks, and walks backward into the dark, vanishing between one blink and the next. The grove is still. The stars, like patient eyes, remain overhead. You are left with a lamp, a flower, a fig, and a phrase that refuses to settle. Sleep comes, eventually. The fig in your hand is half eaten now, the sweetness lingering just long enough to make you forget your tongue was ever dry. The grove feels a little different, more spacious, as if the very air stretched to accommodate all those divine presences. Or maybe it's just you, lighter now, like your thoughts have been gently rearranged by celestial hands. But it isn't over yet. You shift, brushing off a few fig leaves, and hear soft sandals approaching. The steps are measured, graceful, almost theatrical. And then, emerging through the olive trees, comes someone who seems to glow from within. Apollo, god of the sun, of prophecy, of music. His robes shimmer in saffron and white, and his hair falls like sunlight caught in wind. No lyre in sight, but you can almost hear it anyway. The melody that never stops, always somewhere just beyond earshot. You wouldn't survive his glare. Or maybe you would, but you'd be permanently more poetic afterward. Apollo doesn't walk so much as flow. His hands move as he speaks, though no words are uttered. It's as if he's humming reality into place. Historians still argue whether Apollo was imported into the Greek pantheon from Anatolian roots, or if he emerged whole from the Greek imagination. A divine polymath, part muse, part enforcer. His domains are as vast as the sun's arc. He stands beside the old fig tree, fingers grazing the bark. Then, quietly, he snaps off a twig. You rise again. Sleep has begun to pull at your shoulders, but the parade is not yet done. Another rustle, but this time heavier, firmer. The sound of hooves? No, sandals again, but with authority. And then she steps into view. Athena. No thunder, no trumpets, just presence. Her tunic is indigo, her cloak the color of worn marble. She wears a helmet pushed back slightly, revealing calm, calculating eyes that seem to know everything and still choose to be patient with your ignorance. You wouldn't survive her questioning, or maybe you would, but she'd give you homework afterward. She approaches the stone you've been sitting on and, with perfect posture, lowers herself beside it. Not like a queen, but like a professor who's decided your essay might be worth a second read. Historians still argue whether Athena was more loved or feared in the classical world. She was the goddess of wisdom, yes, but also of strategy, of crafts, of righteous warfare, patron of Athens, friend of heroes, the voice inside your head when you choose logic over emotion. She speaks at last, her voice low and firm. You're listening now. You nod. No, not just to me, to everything. You blink, trying to understand, but she doesn't elaborate. Athena does not spoon-feed. She lets the lesson unfold over time. She reaches into a pouch and removes a tiny spool of thread, undyed, simple, the color of straw. She places it in your hand. Make something, she says. You look down. It's barely enough to wrap twice around your wrist. But what? She's already gone. You stare at the thread. It's warm. You tuck it away and rise once more. The moon is shifted in the sky, lower now. The faintest streaks of dawn begin to gray the edges of the grove. You step slowly, almost reluctantly, toward what you suspect is the final encounter of the night. And there she is, a figure sitting cross-legged on a flat stone. Her back is to you, but the air around her smells of pomegranates, of dark soil, of something both floral and subterranean. Persephone. She turns, and her face is neither young nor old, just timeless. Eyes dark as polished garnet. She smiles, but there's a weight behind it. Not sadness, not quite. Depth. You wouldn't survive her silence, or maybe you would, but only if you knew how to read between the lines of a sigh. She gestures for you to sit. You do, carefully, the stone cool beneath you. Historians still argue whether Persephone had agency in her abduction myth, or if the entire story evolved to explain the seasons. Either way, she became queen of the underworld, not just a prisoner, but a ruler, both flower and bone, both girl and goddess. She doesn't speak of Hades or of Demeter. She only speaks of dreams. How often, she says, do you remember them when you wake? You think for a moment. The answer doesn't matter, only the pause. She nods anyway, as if you've said something wise. She hands you something small and wrapped in linen. A seed, she says. Don't plant it yet. Just carry it. You take it, carefully tucking it into your sleeve with Athena's thread. And when you look up again, she is gone. Just stars. Just trees. Just a U-shaped quiet in a world finally ready to rest. You rise slowly, brushing stray leaves from your tunic as the quiet settles once more. The grove has thinned. Or maybe it's the night that's thinning, its dark edges softening as the first hints of morning begin to brush against the horizon, pale and unsure. Your steps are slower now and softer. You carry with you a thread, a seed, and a swirl of half-remembered conversations that feel like they happened centuries ago, or maybe minutes ago. You pass back through olive trees that seem to bow just slightly in the breeze, as if offering some silent farewell. But the gods aren't quite finished. Ahead, lounging on a low stone wall like he owns the place, because he kind of does, is Dionysus. You'd know him anywhere. Disheveled curls, flushed cheeks, eyes sparkling with the kind of wisdom only fermented grapes can bestow. He's barefoot, naturally, with a leopard tail hangs loosely from his belt. He looks like he's either about to start a wild festival or fall asleep in the grass, and it's honestly hard to tell which. You wouldn't survive his party. Or maybe you would, but you'd wake up singing in a language you don't remember learning. He raises his cup toward you and grins. You're still walking? Brave soul. You nod, unsure whether it's rude to decline an offering from the god of wine, ecstasy, and drama. He seems to sense your hesitation and simply laughs. No need to drink, he says. You've already wandered through half a dozen myths tonight. That's intoxicating enough. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a Thracian deity absorbed into the Greek pantheon, or a figure born purely from the Greek soil, divine embodiment of duality, joy and madness, vines and ashes. Either way, he was worshipped in revels and feared in equal measure. One scholar once described him as the god who never asked permission and never needed to. He plucks a grape from the bunch and flicks it toward you. You catch it, mostly by accident. Eat that before the sun sees you, he winks. You do. It's sour, surprisingly grounding. Dionysus stretches, yawns, and begins to hum some off-key melody. You suspect it's a lullaby, though it's hard to tell when it's sung like a drinking song. You take your leave, turning down a winding path, now speckled with dew. Your feet carry you to a quieter place. A gentle slope leads to a pool, clear, shallow, ringed by reeds and wildflowers just beginning to unfurl. Sitting by the edge, gazing into her reflection like she's questioning her own story, is Artemis. Unlike her twin brother Apollo, she wears no glowing robes or golden symbols. Her attire is practical, simple teal tunic, a bow slung lazily across her back, and hair bound in a no-nonsense braid. There's a calm around her that doesn't demand reverence. It just exists, like the hush before a deer steps into view. You wouldn't survive her forest, or maybe you would, but only if you promised never to break a twig on purpose. She doesn't acknowledge you at first, just keeps watching the water, where a tiny frog makes its way across a lily pad, like a priest late for temple. Finally, she speaks. Still awake? You nod. She doesn't smile, but there's no disappointment in her voice, only observation. Sleep is a kind of wilderness, she says. Some people hunt it, some get hunted by it. You watch her draw a smooth pebble from her belt pouch and skip it across the water. It hops 4 times before disappearing with a soft plunk. Historians still argue whether Artemis was originally a fertility goddess or always a symbol of wild, untouched nature. Over time, she became associated with chastity, moonlight, and quiet vengeance. But here, she just feels like solitude personified. She stands, stretches lightly, and turns to you. "You'll sleep soon," she says. "You're almost out of places to wander." And with that, she vanishes into the trees like a shadow slipping between leaves. You sit at the water's edge a moment longer, letting the breeze wrap around your arms like a borrowed shawl. There's one last presence to meet, one you've half expected since the beginning. You follow a winding trail up a small incline, where the wind begins to smell faintly of sea salt and citrus. And at the crest of the hill, silhouetted against the paling sky, stands a figure draped in robes of dawn pink and cloud white. Aphrodite. She's not posed like a goddess, not striking some dramatic marble stance. She simply stands, barefoot, brushing dew from the grass with the hem of her gown. Her eyes are soft, yes, but far from sleepy. There's too much knowing in them. You wouldn't survive her smile. Or maybe you would, but afterward, nothing else would quite compare. She looks at you like she's seen every crush you've ever had, every blush, every silly love note you never sent. She doesn't mock, she just remembers. "Still searching?" she asks. You shrug. "Maybe." She steps closer, places something in your hand. A feather, impossibly fine, nearly translucent. "Love isn't always loud," she says. "Sometimes it just means staying up until someone else falls asleep." Historians still argue whether Aphrodite's roots trace back to Cyprus, Phoenicia, or earlier Near Eastern traditions. Her myths often clash, born from sea foam in one, from Zeus in another, a goddess of contradictions, desire and diplomacy, softness and sharpness. She places a hand briefly over your chest. "You'll carry dreams now," she says. And just like that, the sky begins to lighten. You turn back toward the quiet path, heart slowed, hands full, thread, seed, feather, memory. You're no longer sure if you walked through dreams or history tonight. But you're sure of one thing. You're finally tired. You wander downhill now, feeling the earth beneath your feet shift subtly from soft forest floor to cracked stone, an old path worn smooth by centuries of sandals. The air changes too, less fragrant, more mineral, like damp stone walls kissed by sea wind. Ahead, the shadows gather once more, not threatening, but steady, like the dimming of a lantern as morning prepares its slow arrival. You pass a weathered gate, half-hinged and ivy-wrapped. A small bronze plaque glints faintly, perhaps a remnant of some old dedication. Beyond it lies what appears to be a ruined sanctuary, half forgotten and gently crumbling, yet somehow still sacred in the way quiet places always are. And there, seated on a toppled pillar, scribbling furiously into a wax tablet, is Hermes. Well, of course, it's him. The sandals winged and dusty, the tunic short and wind-rumpled. His cap tilts to one side like he's been running errands for too many mortals and not enough immortals. His satchel spills scrolls, feathers, and one suspiciously shiny coin. His expression is both amused and mildly exasperated. You wouldn't survive a day as his intern. Or maybe you would, but you'd be several cities away before realizing he never told you what the job was. He looks up at you without surprise. "Still on the night shift, are we?" You nod and he grins. Typical. The one time mortals aren't begging for messages and you're wide awake. He flips his tablet closed and hops off the column like he's just remembered he left a pot boiling in another mythology. "Sleep is inefficient," he declares, "but occasionally poetic." You follow as he walks, feet moving fast but oddly quiet, like someone who's used to avoiding both gods and goats. His movements are restless, half skip, half strut, like even standing still for too long might wrinkle time. Hermes, god of travelers, boundaries, and thieves, was always a paradox. Messenger and mischief maker, guide of souls and sneak of snacks. Historians still argue whether he began as a pastoral god or a trickster deity imported from earlier cultures. What's clear, he got around, and everything from commerce to lullabies eventually bore his fingerprints. As you walk together, he rattles off, he vanishes mid-step. Of course, one blink, and he's a breeze between trees, a whisper on stone, a thought you almost forget. You're alone again, but not lonely. Ahead, a flicker of light pulses low to the ground. Not fire, not moon, something stranger. As you approach, you see a figure crouched by a pool of ink-black water, stirring it with a reed stylus. She wears robes of smoky gray, embroidered with starbursts and waves. Her hair spills like shadows down her back. Her eyes, when she looks up, hold constellation, not reflections, but memories, your own. Dreams you've half forgotten, faces from childhood, nights when you were awake for no reason you could explain. A stone bench in a foreign town, a smell of basil and wet clay, all of it swirling in gentle spirals. You think sleep is an escape, Hecate finally says. Her voice is like candle smoke, soft, clinging, but it's just another gate. You nod, though you're not sure what you're agreeing to. Most mortals walk through it backwards, she continues. They try to forget, but the wise ones, they carry something back. She dips her fingers into the ink, draws a spiral on your wrist. It tingles for a moment, then fades. Historians still argue whether Hecate was once a goddess of everything, sky, earth, sea, before narrowing to magic and thresholds. What remains certain is her role in transition, not of places, but states of being, awake to dreaming, living to remembering. You thank her, and she simply inclines her head. A soft wind pushes at your back. It's time. You walk forward again, the earth flattening beneath your feet. You've crossed something invisible but real. A final layer of night. The air is no longer blue with shadow, but tinged with pale warmth, like the promise of tea after a long conversation. The gods are quiet now, but their presence lingers. Not like footsteps, but like echoes, symbols tucked in your pocket, phrases humming behind your eyes. You breathe deeply, and something in your chest unwinds. You've walked through stories tonight, through myths and maybe memories. And now you're ready to lie down again, not to wrestle with thoughts, not to count sheep, but just to drift. For once, to sleep not out of exhaustion, but trust. You settle into the earth again. Only now, it doesn't feel like settling into something. but more like returning to it. The grass beneath you seems gentler. The breeze has mellowed. Even the stars appear to hum lower in the sky, like a song that's been playing all along, and you've only just noticed the chorus. Your thoughts float more slowly now. Each one rises, drifts a little, then dissolves like ink in water. No pressure to catch them. No need to name them. Just let them pass. You remember Hera, not the sharp-tongued queen of Olympus, but the quieter one behind the stories. The one who protected households, presided over marriages, kept an eye on the little details of life. Not because they were glamorous, but because they mattered. You wonder how many people thanked her for their sleep, or if she was more the type to ensure you earned it first, by surviving the daily mess of human relationships, disappointments, and love held together by the smallest stitches of loyalty. You shift slightly on the ground and feel the coolness of dew gathering on your arm. Somewhere nearby, a bird makes a noise that isn't quite a chirp, just a test of mourning. As if the trees are debating whether it's worth waking up today. You think of Apollo, god of sunlight, music, truth, and the kind of radiance that almost feels smug. But there's another version of him in your mind now. One who, in older myths, rode a chariot that pulled not just the sun, but the rhythm of each day forward. Sleep was his opposite, not his enemy. A balance, a call and response duet between night and day. Historians still argue whether Apollo's many domains were inherited from earlier regional deities, or whether he was always meant to be a one-man pantheon. Either way, you get the feeling he'd appreciate your efforts to find some rhythm in your own nighttime wandering. A moth flutters near your face, pale wings, soft as parchment. You don't flinch. It hovers for a moment, curious, maybe, or maybe just aimless, like you. Then it drifts upward, drawn toward the stars that are beginning to dim. Your mind turns now to Eros, not the overly romantic version with hard-tipped arrows, but the raw, old force of desire and creation. The push toward connection, toward dreams, toward the things you want but can't name. The Greeks didn't see sleep as absence. They saw it as a different kind of presence, a sacred pause, a place where truths slipped in sideways and stitched themselves into your bones. You try to picture Hypnos again, not in his more theatrical portrayals, but just as a gentle presence somewhere behind your thoughts. Maybe he's already pulled that soft cloth across your shoulders. Maybe the river he tends has finally touched your toes. The ground feels heavier beneath you, not in weight, but in promise. You remember one last figure, Pan, wild and whimsical, half goat, half grin. The god of sudden fear, yes, but also of drowsy woods and naps in sun-dappled glades. Maybe his sleep was chaotic, unplanned, stolen between flutes and footsteps. But it was real, and perhaps more honest than any divine doctrine. The Greeks saw sleep as a complicated thing, part divine, part human, part medicine, part mystery. It came through herbs, rituals, whispered names, and sometimes just walking the long way around until your legs gave out and your brain gave in. You've taken the long way tonight. You remember the shepherd boy, the watcher with the lantern, the silent tea traders, Hermes with his flower, Hecate with her ink. Not just gods, but guides. Not just myths, but mirrors. And now here you are, alone again, but never really. Your fingers curl in the grass, and you notice a small shell tucked between the blades, Smooth, worn, probably dropped by some passing bird. It doesn't belong here. But then again, neither do you. And somehow, that's okay. A distant breeze carries the scent of fig leaves and something baking. Bread? Or just your memory playing tricks again? You smile. Sleep may not arrive like a chariot or a thunderbolt, but it tiptoes closer now, like an old friend who knows not to knock, just to sit beside you, wait, and whisper when you're ready. Your eyes drift half open, then close again. Not from effort, but because the weight behind them has finally begun to settle. It's not sleep yet, but it's the threshold, that liminal hallway where you forget what you were thinking and just breathe instead. The sky above you no longer looks like a painting. It looks like a ceiling, something to shelter you, not impress you. Pale threads of dawn begin to stretch across the edge of the horizon, weaving soft ribbons of blue and blush that barely color the stone walls around you. You think of Nyx again, not as terror, not as the void, but as comfort, a goddess whose robes carried galaxies and whose footsteps quieted the chaos of day. The Greeks didn't pray to her lightly. She wasn't one to be summoned, but if she passed near you, you'd know. You'd feel it in your bones. A hush, a weight, a lullaby written in stars and dust. Historians still argue whether Nyx represented something older than even the Olympians, a primal memory of night as creator, as mother, as mystery beyond myth. And as your breath slows, you find yourself agreeing, not with the scholars, with your body, your senses, your silence. The fig you carried earlier is still near your side. You don't eat it. Just rest your palm over it, like a charm. Somewhere in the city, a rooster finally finds its confidence. It crows once, then again, more sure this time. Other birds join in, the chorus of day preparing its entrance. But you stay where you are, because even as light climbs over the rooftops, your night hasn't quite ended. Your thoughts still drift like shadows. The gods are still close, not just stories now, but presences, lurking around corners, whispering beneath leaves, curling up at your feet like invisible familiars. The Greeks weren't wrong about everything. They knew the power of repetition, of ritual, of walking a question long enough for the answer to emerge. Not shouted, not written, but felt. Tonight, you've walked with them, slept with them, not literally, but spiritually, silently, through laurel groves and fig trees, down alleys and across courtyards, past braziers and scrolls, beneath gods and beside goats. You've recited their poetry, counted their sheep, and now, maybe, you understand something they always suspected, that sleep isn't taken, it's offered, a gift, a god, a moment you accept when you finally stop asking for it. And there it is, the breath between thoughts, the sigh without cause, the soft flicker behind your eyelids like stars behind clouds. You lie still. Let the day come. But you don't have to rise yet. You don't have to do anything, because sleep, ancient and wild, has finally arrived. Not as a god, not as a myth, but as the simplest truth of all. You're tired, and that's sacred. Now, let your thoughts move slower than ever before. Imagine the sky above you turning to warm parchment, its stars fading into soft gold ink, no longer sharp or urgent, but faint and comforting, like something remembered from a dream. The air around you thickens with stillness, the kind that makes every breath feel heavier, but more peaceful too. The gods are quiet now. No thundering declarations, no cosmic rivalries, just presence. You feel Hermes's feather brush your thoughts as they lift, weightless. You hear Hecate's whisper behind your shoulder, not asking anything of you, just watching. You sense the soft touch of Hypnos, pressing down gently, like a woolen blanket at just the right temperature. You are not asked to believe or to know, only to rest. The world, for now, expects nothing of you. ...